Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard is directed by Patrick Hughes and stars Ryan Reynolds, Samuel L. Jackson, Salma Hayek, Antonio Banderas, and among others. And this is the sequel to The Hitman's Bodyguard. And in this story, we deal with Ryan Reynolds' character from that film, who's trying to escape the life as being a bodyguard after the events of the first movie. And he ends up, as you see in the trailer, ends up coming across Salma Hayek and Samuel L. Jackson as they get into a plot that's trying to stop Antonio Banderas from attacking Europe. And as the movie goes along, they end up doing their whole Samuel L. Jackson and Ryan Reynolds get into the whole spiel again, bickering back and forth, along with some stuff that involves with Salma Hayek also spending her honeymoon. Now, here's some backstory. Now, I actually remember enjoying the first Hitman's Bodyguard movie when it came out, and I thought that it was an entertaining flick, but I did feel like it really just held it together from the chemistry that was from Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson in that film. And while I did thought Gary Oldman was a good villain in that film, I thought he was pretty, wasted in that one from what they could have went with. But I still thought it was a good watch. And with this one, it kind of got me interested because seeing these two actors back together and also bringing in Salma Hayek again from the first film was something that got me curious. And also seeing how they would, bring in Antonio Banderas, which is funny because him and Salma Hayek had, they played together in the Desperado movie and also in Once Upon a Time in Mexico. And it was just, it got me interested to see how they would play it out with it and everything. And I kind of went into it with low expectations because it was one of those movies that I don't think was going to be as funny as the first one, seeing how because with comedies, they're hard to do with sequels. And going into it, I kind of went into it with just the lowest expectations. And I got to say that upon seeing the film, that I thought it was enjoyable, but it still was a drop compared to the first one because I felt like the humor wasn't as on par as the first movie was, and the entertainment wise was a little bit of a drop, but but it was still watchable for me. And with that, to get my pros out of the way, I will say once again the chemistry is still great with Samuel L. Jackson and Ryan Reynolds, and they're always fantastic together, like they were in the first film, with the humor, with them bickering back and forth, and having Samuel L. Jackson say his signature motherfucker lines all the time. But the one who really stood out for me the best was Salma Hayek. Like, she gets so fucking, vulgar, at her most that I've ever seen her in this film. And, she gets some pretty good fucking one-liners that I thought really had me cracking up. And it just was really a blast to see her in this kind of role again. And I also got to give credit to the way that the movie plays out with the way the action scenes are going in where, it's kind of on the same level as the first one, where there are some cool shootouts in some areas, and there is some cool bloody shootouts, and some of the nonchalant scenes where you have like you see in the trailer where you have Ryan Reynolds enjoying his time in vacation. There's gunfire happening, and he's oblivious to it. Scenes like that I thought were kind of funny. The way it plays out with the comedy in the action departments, and it does kind of give you on that very, high speed, high octane action that's very fast paced, and it does its job with that. And it's great to see Antonio Banderas again in a movie like this, and seeing him reunited with Salma Hayek was a good treat. And while I thought his villain could have been a lot better because he does play the standard villain this time compared to what we saw with, because I even prefer Gary Oldman in the first film because there was much more of a menacing feel of him in the first one. I thought Antonio Banderas was good, but I just think that he just wasn't really given a whole lot to do as a villain. But to get my other pros out of the way, I will say that the movie also plays into some interesting stuff that I think really makes it feel like it's on having a Hitman on vacation type movie, where there's a lot of great production design with them going around Europe and stuff that I thought was very well shot and choreographed, and it gets you in that vibe where the way that there's a running joke about how Salma Hayek is trying to have a baby and stuff with Samuel L. Jackson, and I thought just the biggest pros I have really is the humor, the way it plays out, because a lot of the lines that they're given to an extent are still funny, but that does kind of lead more into my cons in this time. And I will say that this movie, while the humor is still good in areas, there is parts of it where it does feel like it's not as, on par with some of the lines in the first film, and even still, it does get kind of stale in some areas, and they're not really, not every joke lands in some regard. And the other thing, too, is that there's some stuff that they do in this that I felt like was very convoluted as far as its plot, because it's like going all over the place with going from one location to the next all over Europe and everything, and it does really get out there of just trying to be just a regular world domination kind of plot for it. And they even bring in characters that honestly you really didn't really have much to do with the story. Like they bring in Frank Grillo's character that really, I mean, I like the guy as an actor, but I felt like he was kind of really underused in this movie a lot, and they didn't really do a lot with him, other than to give him, banter back and forth with Samuel Jackson and Ryan Reynolds. And there are some funny parts that he calls them, that he's calling them names and shit, but it just doesn't always land with some of the jokes, because it felt like it's very rinse and repeat. And that's the other thing I can say, is that there's a lot of scenes where it's always just, they're talking one moment, and then they're on the way shooting and stuff, and then it's like rinse and repeat of going on from point A to point B and everything. And the other con I did have is, much like with the first film, is that there is some very noticeable CGI in a lot of scenes, and some of the areas of the way it's filmed, and some of the shootouts do look pretty, some of the stunts and everything, they do kind of like, there are points where some of it looks like it's very CGI'd on some of the stunt work they do in certain scenes, and it did stick out like a sore thumb. That kind of took me out. I was like, okay, that looks pretty off and everything. That, and I felt like some of the action that they do, it is very frenetic-y, to where it does feel like it's very, like, we're doing that whole shaky kind of thing. That the director was kind of is known for that, because he had that same kind of issue with Expendables 3. And I felt like the director still hasn't, completely crafted much when it comes to certain action parts, especially when it comes to certain fight scenes that he does. Like, there are some cool, like, while there is some, enjoyable, there is some action scenes that are, for the most part, like, very high edge and frenetic and everything. It did feel like it's kind of just, very standard, just shoot one person and then on the way. Although there is one part that I will say that stood out, where Samuel Jackson uses a I forgot what it was called. It was like some kind of weapon that has like these spikes on it that he uses at one point, and there's a line where he says, "I wanted to keep that fucking mace," or whatever. I forgot what the weapon was called. I think it was called a mace, but that scene did crack me up. Then I did also feel like there is an instance where some of the action does feel kind of tonally off with the way it played out. Well, some of the humor did kind of play out with the way the movie was kind of going. Not going to spoil anything, but there is something that we get into that was a very pivotal scene that I thought was pretty nice, like a good change of tone with Ryan Reynolds' character in the scene, where we get to reveal some of his backstory. And I did feel like the movie was kind of really tone deaf when it came to the scene, because it was meant to be like this kind of like emotional scene that takes place, but then it's trying to be all frenetic the way it plays out, because it's kind of like it pulls a 180 and does a joke afterwards, like in the same scene. And I felt like the tone just wasn't quite there. So I did feel like that was kind of a misdirection in that part. That really kind of felt like the tone was off. But overall, though, I still thought the movie was still a fun time for what it is, and because I was still laughing throughout it and I was still entertained, I still thought it was an enjoyable. I still thought it was a good watch. And so with that being said, since it was a drop compared to the first movie, I'm going to give the movie just more of an average Joe on the Film Phreeks meter. So for those of you who have also seen the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.